I call on Government Order of the Day number 1. A point of order, the Honourable David Parker.
Thank you, sir. My point of order relates to the next notice of motion of the government. And I have a number of points to make in support of the proposition that I think this notice of motion should be debatable, sir, rather than a non-debatable motion. Sir, there's a very unusual situation. This bill has been reported back from Select Committee for a second reading, and the proposal by the government, according to the notice of motion, is to refer it back to Select Committee rather than allow it to have a second reading. There is no provision in standing orders covering this situation. I think everyone accepts that there is no provision in standing orders. And, sir, as a consequence, in order for the government to not have it heard at second reading and hear the views of parliamentarians on it and get it back to Select Committee, it's got to get the agreement of this House for an abnormal process. And, sir, my submission is, particularly in the circumstances of this case, that should not happen without the House debating the circumstances of it and whether it should. Sir, when this was put on the order paper earlier in the day, I went to see the clerk, and the clerk gave me 2 reasons as to why the clerk thought that this could be done or should be done without debate. Sir, the first of those reasons was relying on Standing Order Section 204, which says that in respect of proceedings at Select Committees, they are to apply the conduct of proceedings in a committee of the whole House unless subject to standing orders to the contrary. Sir, with respect to the clerk, I don't think that there's any help for the House in respect of Standing Order 204, because the Standing Order 204 is talking about what happens at Select Committee, not about how things get to Select Committee. And so, sir, I would submit to you that Standing Order 204 is of complete irrelevance to the decision as to whether there should be a debate on this motion. Sir, the second point I would make is at the moment, and if this proceeds in this way, the House will have had absolutely no explanation as to what's happened over the last 11 months. The opposition parties will have had no opportunity to talk to the merits of this issue at all, sir. You will be aware from the records of the Select Committee, and I'm not in any way at risk of contempt in this, sir, because the minutes are out and the conduct of the proceedings last week are clear, that the Select Committee minority, the opposition parties, were blocked from having any report back to Parliament as to what's happened, and we were further blocked from providing a minority report, sir. If there is no opportunity to debate this, we can't put any of those points before the House, sir, and we are placed in the vidious position of, despite this very unusual process, the House being none the wiser as to what happened. 2 more points, sir. In respect of the other 2 points that the clerk made to me, he said that precedent could be drawn from Standing Order 311, which deals from recommittal to the committee of the House in a 3rd reading. Of course, where that happens, the House and the members immediately have the opportunity to address the House in that committal, in that recommittal to the House. We've got the opportunity to debate these issues. If this goes straight back to Select Committee, we have absolutely no opportunity. So I don't think that 311 is any of assistance anyway, either, sir. The reference that the clerk made to the only precedent that he was aware of, and I wasn't even aware of that precedent until he raised it, and I thank him for raising it, the food bill, that was not at all comparable to this situation, and that food bill had sat on the order paper, from my memory, it might have even been years, and then there was a new supplementary order paper being put to the Select Committee for new submissions, and everyone in Parliament agreed it should go back to Select Committee, and so it wasn't a debate a motion that was debated. Sir, that's not at all comparable. If agreement over a non-controversial issue such as that one is taken to be a precedent for how controversial issues are handled, then we will have poor order in this House. The final point, sir, is that in the absence of a standing order setting out how these things ought to be dealt with, and there is no standing order, and in the absence of a speaking ruling on the issue, then the House should be given the opportunity to debate the matter so that the House can decide how to proceed upon debate, rather than the Executive being given an easy option, sir. Sir, I therefore ask you to reconsider the issue as to whether in this instance, this motion from the government to recommit this bill to the Select Committee 11 months after it first went there should be debated.
The Honourable Dr.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to speak to the point of order that's been raised by Mr. Parker and make 4 points. The first, there is absolutely nothing abnormal about the government referring a bill back to the Select Committee. It's exactly what occurred last year in this Parliament with the food bill. The reason in that case was that there were further work for the Select Committee to do on the bill, and the circumstances here are the same. The second is the member makes the claim that it's unusual for a bill to be still in the Select Committee process after 11 months. I would draw your attention, Mr. Speaker, to the Marine Reserves Bill that was introduced into the Parliament by the previous government in 2002 and had extensions all the way through 8 years of consideration at Select Committee. The third point, Mr. Speaker, is I was part of the Standing Orders discussion when the Business Committee process was set up, a Member of Parliament before we had the Business Committee and after. And the decision that the Standing Orders Committee made at the time, Mr. Speaker, was that any single party would be able to object to an extension being granted by the Business Committee. There it was by consensus. And at the time that decision was made, it was quite deliberate that in the event there was not a consensus, in other words, any single party could object to a Select Committee extension, then it was for the House to make the decision by majority to refer a bill back to the Select Committee, and to now require a debate on that would be a substantive change from the very intent of establishing a business committee. The last point I'd make, Mr. Speaker, is in the political dialogue that occurred last week, members opposite asserted that it was the government's intention not to have a report from the Select Committee, to have it pro forma reported back to the House this week, and for us just to use our parliamentary numbers and to bung it through the Parliament. That is not the government's intent. The government's intent is that this bill does require the substantive 500-page report that was only received by the department last week to be referred back to the Select Committee. When the Select Committee produces its report back to the House, all of the views, including the debate about why it has taken some time for the Select Committee to report the bill back to the House, can be dealt with at the time when the Select Committee considers its proper consideration.
I'll hear from the Right Honourable Winston.
Mr. Speaker, look, first of all, it is the timing of this referral back. We've seen bills referred back for third reading with the consent of the House, but after a discussion. The second thing is, there's no standing order on this, and in that event, one would surely, when a request is there when there's a request for a debate, one would surely think that in the absence of a standing order, that would be granted. Why? Well, the public's got a right to know what's going on. Exactly. Out there in New Zealand, the people have got a right to know what's going on, which is why these parliamentary proceedings are broadcast right around the nation. And if there is no referral with respect to this motion, first of all to the debating structure itself, then Parliament will not be informed, and worse still, the public won't be. Now, if this critically important matter to the whole future of the whole nation and the National Party's economic strategy is what they say it is, then the more the public knows about that and what is happening to it, the better. And I suggest, therefore, you should not err in the favour of a debate, but for the very reason we gave, favour the debate.
Dr. David Clark.
Speaking to the point of order, my experiences of what I have of other speakers and of yourself is that you tend to exercise a ruling in favour of the House and the opportunity to debate, and that is with precedent in the absence of standing orders and speakers' rulings. I think the House should be given the opportunity to debate the matter. It's not an opportunity to give the Executive an easy out.
I'll hear from the Honourable Simon Bridges.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My very brief perusal of the standing orders. There's been comment made by other members, respected senior members of this House, but there's no standing order that applies. I mean, my brief reading of this standing order 74.2, where we're dealing with discharge or postponement of order of the day, makes it abundantly clear there is no amendment or debate on the question to discharge or postpone an order of the day.
Which standing order is the member quoting?
74.2. And my argument would be very clear. There is simply no getting around those plain words there in that standing order. There is simply no ability here to debate this matter.
No, I'm not going to hear too many more. There's been a lot of members have had an opportunity. I will hear from the Honourable Trevor Mallard, who was a learned scholar of many years.
Well, a person of some experience, sir, in these matters. The first is I think the acting leader of the House better have a look at the standing orders. I think he might be using an out-of-date set of standing orders when he was making that reference. I think he was probably referring to 74 rather than 70. But no, he might want to. He might want to get the standing.
I thought the member referred to standing order 4.
Well, 72 is certainly not the one that he should.
Can I just clarify? Yep. The member, Mr. Bridges, when he referred to a standing order, referred to standing order 74 brackets 2.
Oh, thank you. If that's fine. I apologise for mishearing him. So I want to make about 3 points. The first is that in this House, motions are debatable unless it is clear that they are not. And that's quite a high test. I want to make it clear that we have changed the approach to the debate on bills over a period of time. And at the point we amalgamated the debate on the report of the committee and of the second reading. And I think that should be taken into account in any new ruling, because under the previous standing orders and any sort of precedents that might flow from way back, we would have already had a report back debate before we come to this point. So I do want to accept that on the face, McGee, when he deals with this matter on page 363 of the third edition, does indicate that this would be a non-debatable motion. But, sir, in doing so, he appears to be referring to the discharge or postponement, the absolute discharge of a bill, or the postponement of a bill, as opposed to a discharge for the purpose of referral back to a select committee. He seems to be, it's an awful thing to disagree with McGee, but my view is that he has his references incorrect on page 363.
Eugenie Sage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just 2 additional points. The Minister said that it was the Select Committee was considering a pro forma report. There were quite detailed and extensive minority reports from opposition parties, Labor and the Greens, so it would not have been simply a pro forma report. And the other point is that the Minister is in relation to Standing Order 292, and the Minister yesterday in his press release said, and I quote, that Select Committee consideration may be completed this year but may flow early into next year. So if the Select Committee is only going to be asked to consider the report for consider the bill for less than 4 months, then that is normally debated by the House.
And I thank all members for their comments. I have